Overflow rooms. The clip you just watched is from a 1980s sermon by televangelist Benny Hinn, delivered in the Orlando Christian Center in Florida. With roots in televangelism, overflow rooms became a mainstream event management strategy for institutions such as churches, museums, and universities in the early 2010s. Through broadcasting live video from the main event hall into specially designated and temporary overflow rooms, institutions were able to accommodate surplus capacity for large events when the demand for in-person attendance surpassed what they could spatially accommodate. This surplus demand was mobilized by the widespread adoption of Web 2.0 platforms like YouTube and Facebook, which regulate physical traffic as much as they do web traffic. With social media, Web 2.0 reordered the sender-receiver relationship that defined 20th century communication. Through these participatory platforms, the audience was now equally the producer. The platforms became content aggregators, mobilized by their algorithmic targeting, upposting, and promotion, positioning them as the dominant sites of communication. Facebook, in its better days, became a cafe. YouTube and video streaming replaced television. Online crowds manifest in real space. Media, like crowds, became mobile. The overflow room might seem like a fleeting sociological example of yesteryear, but it points to a paradigmatic shift within the last decade, where the traditional brick-and-mortar architecture of the institution was no longer equipped to meet the new demands for digital participation. When we consider the surplus of novel, virtual programming produced by art institutions in 2020 to compensate for traditional ways of experiencing art in light of COVID-19, the object lesson of the overflow room becomes relevant to our present moment. While large crowds have not been assembling for an in-person event over the last year, crowds are assembling online in new and manifold ways, changing the cultures of exhibition and the productions of the art institution. John Berger told us 50 years ago that when we encounter a reproduction of a work of art, we are seeing it in the context of our own lives. When the overflow room is in reverse, the university, the museum, and church reach us in our bedrooms. The spatial context of our own lives has fully come to the foreground.
Piro, but we're going to take you now to see a few more pieces of Gary's, which are in the back, this back alcove on the west wall. And one is this, these 6 versions of An Eye for an Eye that were printed at Malspina Printmakers in just a couple of years ago. And the image, their silk screens, each is the same image with different color combinations. And I don't know if you can actually see this black on black version in the top left. But it's nice to see the fluorescent orange in the middle in relation to the big Q painting. And as you move through the space, you can kind of get a sense of that.
Limited capacity and publicity programs. Limited capacity is, of course, a safety measure to protect us in the ongoing public health crisis. But speaking metaphorically, what else can limited capacity stand in for? Can it be a staging ground for institutional austerity? In her 2018 essay, Content Industrial Complex, artist Dina Yago writes about the impending collapse of marketing logic and audience participation via forms of user-generated content, and how these logics of commerce come to affect the art exhibition as both a site of consumption and of production. The essay features a section titled Exhibition as Content Farm, where Yago uses Anne Imhoff's Faust and Yayoi Kusama's Infinity Room as case studies of spectacular artworks that drive audience participation through the production of user-generated content. Yago identifies imitative and mimetic tendencies in these exhibitions, where the reproduction of the image spectacle is deferred to the audience's labor contribution. She parallels this with the rise of the content producer and the brand experience under the larger forces which shape the metric logic of digital content and social media. While projects like Infinity Room are celebrated as democratic through encouraging the audience to produce their own image, political theorist Jodi Dean offers her idea of communicative capitalism as one that designates the strange convergence of democracy and capitalism in networked communications and entertainment media. On the one hand, networked communication technologies materialize the values heralded as central to democracy. Democratic ideals of access, inclusion, discussion, and participation are realized in and through expansions and intensifications of global telecommunication networks. On the other hand, the speed, simultaneity, and interconnectivity of electronic communications produce massive distortions and concentrations of wealth as communicative exchanges and their technological preconditions become commodified and capitalized. Dean's definition of communicative capitalism is of interest when considering how the tasks that would traditionally belong to a communications department have been laminated to that of the curatorial. While Yago's figuring of the exhibition as content farm leaves us with vocabulary for considering the mediated condition of the exhibition under COVID-19, where, in its analog form, limited capacity has reordered the exhibition as secondary to the content produced in its support.
With photographed by different cameras, It's not herself, by the way, we see here. And these photographs were triggered by radio waves. It's exactly the same second. So she splits up reality in different ideas that we see the same situation, sometimes black and white in color, in front of the camera, behind the camera. And sometimes with backgrounds of films, different angles at the same time. This is a very unique idea to split up reality. We have sometimes as well a still life, but everything is the same moment, actually really the same moment photographed by different cameras.
Towards Content and Forum, Lessons from Dan Graham's Time Delay Room, 1974. Departing from Yago and Dean, we are observing that the form of art and its mediation has taken both a social and a mediatic turn, and that the capital and circulation of content is now produced through a forum. What can Dan Graham's work from 1974 tell us about the content-forum relationship? Here is the artist's description of his Time Delay Room. In a few moments, documentation of a VR recreation that tributes Graham's work will play. Graham writes, on monitor 1, a spectator from audience A can see himself only after an 8-second delay. While he views audience B in the other room on monitor 2, this audience sees him live on the monitor whose image can also be seen by audience A. The same situation is true for audience B. A spectator may choose to pass from one room and audience to the other. To walk the passageway takes about 8 seconds. A member of Audience A entering Audience B's room would now see the view of Audience B that he had just seen 8 seconds previous when leaving the other room, but he is now part of that audience 8 seconds later. As 8 seconds have passed, the composition of the continuum which makes up Audience B has shifted as a function of time. He has joined it while other present members have arranged their relative positions within it or left and joined the other room.